Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of VitalityOET. We are a women's health, nutrition, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's health and hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that during this time in your life, there are so many changes. All of a sudden, you're having hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, and the sudden weight gain around the belly that seemingly has come out of absolutely nowhere. So you go back to your tried and true methods of eating less, moving more, you're cutting calories, you're cutting carbs, you're running more. But for some reason, nothing seems to be working. You're feeling worse. You're putting in all this effort and getting no results, leaving you completely and totally frustrated. But we know that your body now is inherently different than what it used to be like. So our mission here is to teach women about their bodies, how it changes during this period of your life. That way you can finally reach your health and fitness goals, live a life full of vitality, feel back at home in your body again, and just really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today, something I wanted to talk about is PCOS. This is something I personally have dealt with. It is also something that a lot of our clients deal with on a regular basis or have struggled with their entire life. And it seems to just get worse during perimenopause and menopause. So first of all, let's just talk about what polycystic ovarian syndrome is. That's PCOS. It's a reproductive condition in which the body does not function properly within the hormonal cycle. It's a super vague description because there are several different pathways of PCOS, and we still don't really know a ton about it, which is incredibly frustrating. I myself, as someone who deals with this, it's tough. What we do know so far is that it's typically characterized by irregular menstrual cycles, higher androgen levels, and or cysts on the ovaries. So PCOS is hypothesized to be more common than it's actually diagnosed in women. So what it means is it affects up to 20% of women, but those who have it, only 7 out of 10 are assumed to actually get, are assumed to go undiagnosed. So out of the 20% of women who experience this, 7 out of 10 have no idea they have it, or it's been undiagnosed. That's really crappy because how are you supposed to get help with something if you don't know you have it? So the issue with PCOS is that it's not an ovary issue. It's actually an endocrine and metabolic disorder that affects the body well beyond the ovaries. So what does that mean? Endocrine means hormones, so it's a hormonal issue. And then metabolic disorder, so that means your body's not efficient at like burning calories. This can lead to like insulin resistance as well, so poor blood sugar control and diabetes, for example. So it's well beyond just what's going on at the ovaries. It's a full body thing, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is that it is a full body thing. So we're not just focusing on one tiny area of the body because it is systemic. So the exact cause of PCOS is not completely clear, and researchers are seeing it can vary by person due to genetics, behavior, lifestyle, ethnicity, and the environment also all play a role in its development. So again, that can leave you feeling super frustrated. So not all cases of PCOS will be the same, which is why it can be so complicated to diagnose or to treat. Either way, unmanaged PCOS is associated with the development of type 2 diabetes, infertility, obesity, cardiovascular disease, sleep apnea, fatty liver disease, even depression and mental health disorders. So you can see it's not just an ovary issue. It can lead to a ton of other things that are really going to affect your quality of life and your well-being. So first of all, there are 3 major indicators of PCOS that we need to be aware of, and doctors will typically diagnose it when you have at least 2 of the 3 following indicators. 1, irregular, heavy, or missed periods due to missed ovulation. 2, signs of higher than normal levels of androgens. So male hormones that women also have, there's too much of them. And this can cause symptoms of unwanted hair growth on your face, like upper lip and chin, for example, back and chest, where men will typically grow facial hair or hair in general. Or you might lose hair or see it thinning as well. We can detect those androgens in blood work. And then 3, collections of 12 or more egg follicles or cysts on your ovaries that may be larger than normal. Your doctor will use an ultrasound to check for these cysts. So as you can see, having cysts on your ovaries is actually not enough to diagnose PCOS, which a lot of people don't really realize or understand. So there's a push to rename the condition a metabolic reproductive disorder because it's not just what's going on at the ovaries. There's other things going on. So your symptoms can be vague or mimic symptoms of other conditions. So PCOS can go undiagnosed for quite a while. That happened to me myself. I had it for a long time and didn't know until I went to get like an IUD put in. They did an ultrasound and they're like, hey, you have this stuff. Then I got tested. Awesome. So I went a really long time without realizing I even had this. And there's no single test for it, but a physical exam. So ultrasound and blood tests can help you diagnose PCOS. So there's tons of common symptoms of PCOS, which can include, and just because you have these symptoms doesn't mean you have it, but it's worth getting things checked out because then you can get back to feeling like yourself quicker. So common symptoms are missed periods, irregular periods, or very light periods, ovaries that are large or have many cysts, excess body hair, including like chest, stomach, back, and that's going to be, again, androgen related. So having more of the male hormones than we want to have in our body. Weight gain, especially around the middle. So like your belly, that's also androgen related. Acne or oily skin, which is also going to be androgen related. Male pattern baldness or thinning hair, also androgen related. Infertility, that's ovulation related. Small pieces of excess skin on the neck or the armpits, so like skin tags. That's actually a sign of higher androgens as well. Then lastly, but not least, dark or thick skin patches on the back of our neck, our armpits, and under the breasts. So this is also androgen related. It's kind of like dark and velvety almost. Also a common symptom of PCOS. So, there's something that I find very crazy that a lot of people don't realize is PCOS isn't just one type. We actually have 4 different types of PCOS. So that's going to differentiate like how you approach it and how your body functions with that certain type of PCOS. So the first one is insulin-resistant PCOS. This is the most common type by far, and it affects up to 70% of all people with PCOS. It works in the same way described as above. So essentially your cells start becoming insulin resistant. They don't recognize that insulin exists in your body, which is causing your insulin levels to rise. The rise over time can cause typical PCOS symptoms of irregular periods, fertility issues, excess hair growth, and more. So if you're someone who's really struggling to control your blood sugar, you're having crashes and cravings more often, you get like the shakes if your blood sugar gets too low, things like that can lead to insulin-resistant PCOS because you're just having a hard time regulating your blood sugars because your body becomes more resistant to insulin. Because what insulin does is basically what I like to explain it as. It's knocking on the doors of our cells to open up the doors to allow the sugar from the blood to go into the cell. But when you become more insulin resistant because there's too much sugar constantly in your bloodstream, or it can be caused by stress, which also dumps sugar into your bloodstream. So decreasing stress and making sure you're making good food pairing choices is going to be very important. This doesn't mean you have to cut out carbs. That's a common myth. You don't need to do that. But basically what happens is your body becomes more resistant to the knocking on the door. So before you might need 2 knocks and then the door will open, allowing sugars to go into our cells. Now you're knocking. Nothing is happening. So the blood sugar just stays in your bloodstream, making your body more insulin resistant and leading to fat storage and hormonal issues, which can lead to PCOS. The next one is inflammatory PCOS. This type is driven by chronic inflammation, as you might have guessed from the name. So studies show that it can cause raised levels of CRP, which is an inflammatory marker also associated with diabetes and with heart disease. The cause is believed to be a mix of genetics, stress, environmental toxins, inflammatory inflammatory foods, things like that. Inflammation happens when the immune system is just trying to protect itself against foreign substances in our body. So sometimes the inflammatory response overreacts and it starts affecting our healthy cells. So it starts trying to fight the healthy cells in our body because it's just overreacting to the bad stuff. So it could be like, when like your partner just says something not so great, and then you might not have the best reaction. That's what's happening to your immune system. It's overreacting to a little stimulus, and then it starts attacking the good stuff, just like it would be when you're yelling at your spouse. So that can bring on the symptoms of PCOS. The next type is adrenal PCOS. This is the stress-related type of PCOS, and it causes raised DHEA. This one is me, and also paired with number 4, which we're going to talk about afterwards. But this is DHEA is an androgen hormone that is produced in your adrenal glands. In this particular type of PCOS, the ovaries cause excess androgens, which can cause adrenal dysfunction. So one study tested the adrenal function of 38 patients with PCOS and found that 15 of them produced more adrenal hormones than would be considered normal. So your body feels a stress and produces more hormones than it needs to. And that's going to result in this type of PCOS. So they had a smaller than average adrenal glands as well. So the more stress that you experience, the more adrenal hormones that are released, like cortisol and DHEA, and that's going to result in more PCOS type symptoms. So basically what happens is it's lowering your threshold to being able to handle stress, very similar to what's already happening during perimenopause and menopause. If you've listened to past podcasts or been following me for a while, you'll know that I talk about cortisol and stress a ton and how that really affects our perimenopause and menopause journey. So what we see, for example, is when we have good estrogen levels and everything's functioning well, we're not having hormonal imbalances, we can handle a lot. We can handle exercising hard. We can handle not sleeping super well. We can handle our fasting or cutting our calories or cutting our carbs and dealing with our crazy work schedule and driving our kids everywhere. And then financial stress is we can do okay. But then we reach this point where estrogen starts to drop and now our stress tolerance decreases substantially. So before we could handle maybe 8 of those things, now we can handle 2 before we see this exaggerated stress response. So if you're already dealing with this type of PCOS, that stress tolerance is already decreased. Then you go into perimenopause and menopause, and now it's really, really low. So this is why doing aggressive dieting makes you feel worse and you see more weight gain. This is why cutting out carbs and doing a ton of cardio and doing intensive exercise might result in your weight gain or not having the ability to lose weight. And again, you're feeling fatigued and exhausted and having this hair growth that we don't want to have in places. So it's really important to be aware of that. And then lastly, post-pill PCOS. So I'm a mix of type 3 and type 4, the adrenal stress one, because I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, stress growing up, stress in everyday life. And my stress resiliency is not super great, leading to these hormonal imbalances and PCOS type symptoms. But then there's also post-pill PCOS. And I was on birth control from the time I was 15. So my body did not have a lot of time to learn how to adjust hormones when I was going through puberty and in those adolescence ages, because I was getting it synthetically through birth control. So it's thought that when you come off birth control, some people experience a temporary PCOS-like state. If you had normal periods before you started the pill, but experienced symptoms when you stopped, which includes things like weight gain, acne, hair loss, fertility issues, this could be the case for you as your body adjusts to the changes in hormones. So usually it resolves itself within a few months, but for some people it can actually become permanent, or it can prevent ovulation for the foreseeable future. This is typically happening when you're on progestin-containing birth controls like hormonal IUD, which is something I was on for a very long time. It's important to note that all PCOS types are associated with higher levels of androgenic symptoms. So having more of those male hormones in our body than we want. So higher levels of those. We still need them, but the dosage is too high. So it's also important to note that you can have more than one type of PCOS at a time. So you can have insulin-resistant PCOS and inflammatory PCOS at the same time, because one can contribute to the other. Inflammation typically is going to lead to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance can lead to inflammation. So they're not totally exclusive. You are typically going to have overlap of some symptoms from one type to the other. So learning how to differentiate that and treat it appropriately is very important. So differences in PCOS symptoms. So your specific symptoms could be key to figuring out which type of PCOS that you actually have. And then that helps you be able to focus on the right type of treatment for you. So let's start with insulin-resistant PCOS. The most likely symptom that you are going to experience is weight gain. You can potentially also have some acne, some hair growth or loss, irregular periods, mood changes and sleep issues, as well as known insulin issues. So becoming type 2 diabetic or you're pre-diabetic, or something as simple as hypoglycemia. So those are symptoms for insulin-resistant type PCOS. Then we have the type 2, which is inflammatory PCOS. Most likely symptom here is going to be fatigue. But you may also notice digestive issues or food sensitivities. You may also suffer from skin issues, headaches, joint pain. One study found that those with PCOS had an increased risk of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. So watch for symptoms of those things as well, because that can indicate there's something else going on. It might not just be a cardiovascular thing. Like there can be other things causing your cardiovascular issues. Then type 3, adrenal PCOS. Most likely symptom here is going to be weight gain, but you can also experience acne, hair growth and hair loss, irregular periods. If you are in a stressed state, typically you're going to have more mood swings, fatigue, and sleep problems. And that's going to be recurring. And that can be a sign of adrenal PCOS. That is me to a T. If I start experiencing a little bit too much stress in my life, oh, my elbow, that hurt so bad. I just hit it on the desk for those of you not watching on YouTube. This is me for sure. So when I start experiencing a little bit more stress than what I'm used to or what is like a manageable level for myself, I will start feeling tired pretty quickly. So even last night, for example, I've been under a lot of stress in the last little bit after I did like my live trainings and things like that and just being like quote unquote on. I was exhausted after. I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm waking up like once a night. I'm not waking up feeling well rested. I'm definitely experiencing like mood swings where like I was laying in bed and I just started crying out of nowhere. And Taylor was like, Steph, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't even know. I'm just so exhausted. I just can't even function. And I was just in tears. Clear sign of adrenal PCOS can also be a sign of low progesterone, which is also something that I deal with. And then post-pill PCOS. Symptoms of this are typically the same as the insulin-resistant PCOS, but typically only happen after you stop taking birth control. So that is weight gain, acne, hair growth or hair loss, irregular periods, mood issues, and sleep issues, as well as like blood sugar control issues. So everyone always has questions about PCOS and fertility and pregnancy in particular. And for a lot of women, unfortunately, women with PCOS do have a lack of ovulation, or it's quite random, which makes having children or getting pregnant a lot more challenging. We don't know exactly why this happens, but for some women with PCOS, LH, which is the hormone typically responsible for helping with ovulation, can just stay elevated through your entire menstrual cycle. And what that means is that it prevents FSH from developing an egg to be released. So some fertility experts have developed some medications to help force ovulation, and some people opt for IVF. PCOS can be quite difficult, and having one child may have been a surprise. And then when they try for more, it seems really impossible. And this is because of that spontaneous or random ovulation. So it's harder to track because you just have these fluctuations all the time. So you might find it super easy to have one kid, and then the next time it's harder because you can't really track and figure out the timing for your ovulation. So PCOS and the thyroid connection. So thyroid health is something that we really emphasize for women. We did a whole podcast on thyroid function and hypothyroidism in perimenopause and menopause. Your risk does increase once you hit that age, which is unfortunate. And that has to do with where alleles are on your chromosomes and how they interact and cross, which it sucks just from being a woman. You're more likely to develop it, which sucks, but it is what it is. But a lot of things that can cause hypothyroidism are having a low carb diet, experiencing far too much stress. And the thyroid's really important because it helps regulate our metabolism. Our thyroid is kind of like the thermostat. It controls how many calories we're burning. So if we're just sitting here at rest, is our calorie burn high or calorie burn low? So when our thyroid function slows down, our body becomes less efficient at burning calories. It's almost like we become more of a hybrid car. So we're not great at burning fuel. So we really want to make sure that our thyroid is working really well so that we can burn calories efficiently, returning ourselves into a wonderful calorie burning machine. So you can see how having hypothyroidism or lower thyroid function can make it a lot harder to lose weight because your body's just not good at burning calories. And the answer isn't just to cut calories and eat less, because that's producing more stress on your body, which is just going to slow down your metabolism even more, causing you to burn less calories. So if you want more information on how to improve your thyroid function, go back to that past podcast. I did that with Coach Cariana, and we had a great conversation and used lots of analogies, which would help you understand why thyroid function is so important, what happens during perimenopause and menopause, and how to improve that. So back to the thyroid connection and PCOS. That was a little sidebar there. Sorry, I get my brain just gets going sometimes. But research has shown that women with PCOS are 3 times more likely to have Hashimoto's thyroiditis than women without this hormonal syndrome. While the exact cause of both diseases is unclear, research suspects that there is a slight genetic factor, and environment is going to play a huge role in the onset of both of these disorders. And this, when we say the environment, we're talking about stress. So if you are someone who has had a lot of trauma, a lot of grief, is go, 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 busy, crazy lifestyle, very type A, working out really hard, cutting calories, being in a low calorie state, which is 1,600 calories or less, by the way, for long periods of time, constantly chasing fat loss, running around, taxiing your kids around, go, 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 you are setting yourself up for a greater risk of developing hypothyroidism. And of course, there's no evidence to suggest that one being the cause of the other at that point. So is PCOS causing hypothyroidism? Is hypothyroidism causing PCOS? But an increase in ovarian volume and cyst changes in the ovaries have been reported in primary hypothyroidism. So in the other direction, it's increasingly realized that thyroid disorders are most common in women with PCOS as compared to people who do not have it. So is it the chicken? Is it the egg? I don't know, but stress can help both of these significantly. So making sure you're eating enough, having enough carbs, focusing on recovery and these kinds of things is going to be incredibly monumental. To think that you're going to remove stress completely from your life is completely unrealistic. So learning how to adjust your lifestyle and your nutrition and your exercise to help buffer this as best as we can is the key to being successful here. Birth control and PCOS, we hear about this all the time. So in theory, progestin-containing birth control can help with symptoms of PCOS if you already have it. The progestin will block androgen receptors in the body, preventing as much androgen production. Unfortunately, it's important to know that this is a Band-Aid solution and it doesn't get down to the root causes. It just helps your symptoms, which isn't a bad thing because it can help you have a better quality of life. However, if you need to come off birth control at any point, it can make your symptoms significantly worse because the underlying issue is still going. So the problem's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but you're not aware of it because you have this Band-Aid on top. As soon as that Band-Aid falls off, or you have to get rid of it, the issue underneath is still going on. So this issue becomes a huge problem when you get your IUD removed, and this is when symptoms tend to get incredibly worse for women. So it's just something to be aware of. PCOS and cortisol. You guys know me. I love talking about stress. I love talking about cortisol. There actually isn't much research on it. However, from a mechanistic standpoint, here's how chronic stress is connected to PCOS. Chronic stress is going to increase the circulating levels of cortisol in your blood, that wonderful stress hormone. And we know that cortisol is a puppeteer master. It controls our it influences our thyroid, our sex hormones, our liver function, our gut health, our blood sugar control, all of these things, which is huge because all those things are going to influence our ability to be able to lose weight, or it's going to cause us to gain weight, as well as lead to tons of hormonal imbalances and just our body not functioning the way it needs to. And a body that is stressed out is going to make sure it's preserving fat because it's in defense mode. We don't want that. So when our cortisol levels start increasing in our blood, what happens is that we are going to see an increase in insulin. So everyone's like, oh, carbs increase insulin. Yes, but it also drops down cortisol. So having adequate amounts of carbs in your diet are going to be incredibly important. But what people don't realize is that when you are fasting or working out really hard and eating less, and we're always having these cortisol levels elevated because it's a stress on our body doesn't know it's a good stress trying to lose weight, look better in a bikini, whatever it is that your goal may be, it just perceives it as stress. And it's adding stress on top of stress on top of stress. And when this happens, our body goes into fight or flight mode. So our body actually, when cortisol is increased, it stimulates to our body to release sugar into the bloodstream to either fight the bear or run away from the bear. This is fight or flight. When the blood sugars increase, our body releases insulin to try and knock on the doors of these cells to shuttle sugar in to help the cells have energy to fight this bear or run away from this bear. But you can imagine if that we're constantly in the state of fight or flight, we're constantly stressed out, insulin's just being dumped in over and over and over again. And then our cells are like, okay, we're sick of the knocking. It's just background noise. And now it's just like white noise and the cells aren't responding anymore. So cortisol will always win in this state of dumping sugars and increasing insulin. Insulin's always going to try and compensate for that, but cortisol will always win because cortisol is the puppeteer master. So it's important to understand this whole idea of how stress is going to cause insulin resistance. And so then when insulin resistance is high and we have lots of insulin in our body, it's also going to stimulate the release of androgens in our body. So these are those male sex hormones that are typical of PCOS. So what we're going to see then is that androgens increase in the adrenals and ovaries are going to help release that. And then again, that's going to cause this imbalance of hormones leading to PCOS, which again, we do not want. And it's going to just lead to more hormonal imbalances, which again is going to cause our body to hold on to fat and have all of these negative symptoms that make us feel like garbage, that make us not feel like ourselves. We're irritable, we're moody, we're not sleeping well, we have poor blood sugar control, which means crashes and cravings and belly fat weight gain, which I don't think any of us want. And again, it's a lot easier to stress our body out when we're going through perimenopause and menopause because we lose the hormonal buffer of estrogen and progesterone to really help mitigate that stress. So now that I've delivered all the bad news and now you understand what PCOS is, there's 4 different types and they're all characterized by these different things and you can have different kinds of PCOS. How do we treat it? That is the big question. That's what you guys all want to know. So not all cases of PCOS are going to be the same, which is why it can be so complicated to diagnose and to treat. Either way, unmanaged PCOS is associated with a lot of chronic disease conditions such as type 2 diabetes, infertility, obesity, cardiovascular disease, sleep apnea, fatty liver disease, and even depression and mental health disorders. So the type of PCOS is going to determine the type of treatment, both medical and natural. So it's really important to understand what symptoms that you are dealing with before having to move into this treatment. So if you have insulin-resistant PCOS, the biggest thing is blood sugar control. And this does not mean avoiding carbohydrates, because we already talked about if you're cutting out carbs, that's a lot of stress on the body. We're also going to see a decrease in our thyroid function, which can make everything worse, harder to burn calories, stuff like that. So how do we help regulate our blood sugars if we still need carbs? You just avoid eating naked carbs. I'm not talking about sitting on the couch naked having a donut. I'm talking about having a donut on its own. So you can still incorporate your potatoes, your pasta, your rice, your cereal, your oatmeal, all of these things, fruit, potatoes, all those things. You can have all these things and they all provide nutritional value in our diet. It can help us feel satisfied and hit our cravings so that we're not like binging anymore. So they are supposed to be a regular part of our diet. But how you eat them is what matters. So what you want to do is make sure that you are not eating carbs on their own. So when you're having a carbohydrate, you want to make sure there's protein or fat. And the reason for that, it's going to slow down digestion and you're going to avoid seeing a spike and drop in your blood sugars. So then we're not dealing with issues with insulin. And then we're also going to see that we're full longer, we're satisfied for longer, and then we're not having crashes and cravings afterwards. So another strategy as well is, let's say on your plate, we want to have a balanced plate. So we want to have most of your plate, like half to a third with veggies. The other quarter to a third is carbs, and the other quarter to a third is protein. So what you want to do before digging into those potatoes is have part of your protein and part of your salad, for example, first, and then start eating your carbs. If you eat protein and veggies first, at least a good majority of it, that's going to help slow down the emptying of the food from your stomach, which is going to help avoid blood sugar spikes and drops. And then you're not going to have as many issues with insulin resistance. Making sure you're eating adequate amount of protein is incredibly important, as well as fiber. Fiber helps slow down the emptying of the stomach as well and has many benefits like helping with cholesterol levels, helps with regular bowel movements, which if you aren't able to poop regularly, your body will reabsorb the hormones that are in your poop. So then you're actually going to be leading to a more imbalanced hormone profile because your body's just reabsorbing it because it can't get rid of it through your stool. So that's also very huge. And the next one is making sure that you're not having water right before and during your meals. So having a bunch of fluids during your meal times, first of all, is going to dilute your stomach acid, making it harder for your body to digest, which leads to bloating and feeling uncomfortable and not a good time. But also, it's going to speed up the emptying of your stomach, which leads to those blood sugar spikes and drops. This is one of the biggest things that we see is that if your stomach empties too quickly, so things are highly processed, or you're not having enough fiber and protein in that meal, or veggies, you're going to see your blood sugar spike and drop. So by drinking water before and during your meal, everyone's like, drink some water, it'll fill you up. No, this is a common misconception. What's going to happen is it's going to empty your stomach contents, and then blood sugar spike, drop, cravings, and then you're going to be reaching for the donuts, the chips, the chocolate, all the things that are also not going to be good for your blood sugars. If you want to have your donut, your cake, just have that after your meal. Because again, you don't want to have those carbs on their own. It's going to help really stabilize your blood sugars throughout the day and provide you with great amounts of energy. Other things that you can talk to your practitioner about is medications like metformin. That can help. And then some supplements to recommend could be inositol powder, which can help regulate blood sugars and insulin levels. In some women with PCOS, we always recommend adjusting how you're eating and your nutrition and lifestyle first before opting in for medications, because again, those things won't necessarily fix the underlying problem. If you learn to adjust your lifestyle and nutrition appropriately, you're going to have long-lasting results and less negative side effects because all medications do have risk factors that way. So that was number one. Type number 2 is inflammatory PCOS. So androgen production needs to be reduced. This one is really important. Some doctors can prescribe low doses of anti-androgen medications. So that's something that's worth talking to your practitioner about if you know this is the type of PCOS that you have. Supplements like palmetto can be a natural way to reduce androgens as well. But the key problem here is going to be stress reduction. So how do we improve our stress levels? Make sure you're eating enough food. Make sure you're having enough carbohydrate. Make sure you're focusing on recovery. Make sure you're focusing on good quality of sleep. Having a bedtime snack with a slow digesting carb, either protein or fat, can really help you throughout the night to get better recovery. Because if we're not getting enough recovery, we're constantly inflamed. And then adjusting your exercise intensity. So if you're someone who's doing the Orange Theory, the HIIT classes, you're not allowing your body to recover after and like in between. So this can actually be like reducing your exercise intensity can be a really great way to decrease overall inflammation in your body. And having a pre and post-workout snack will also help with this. Post-workout, your cortisol levels are going to be high because that's what exercise does. And eating afterwards is going to help bring those cortisol levels down and help with inflammation. Because when cortisol is high, inflammation is also high. And then you can also look into having a more anti-inflammatory diet and see if that helps. So you can try playing around with like gluten, dairy, sugars, things that are common inflammatory foods, but aiming for the more Mediterranean diet style with adequate carb intake can be incredibly helpful as well. But we always encourage like adding things into your diet as opposed to taking away so that way you're not feeling deprived and you still enjoy the way that you're eating. The next one, adrenal PCOS. This one is me, and stress reduction is key. So there are some supplements that can help mitigate that cortisol response, like licorice or adaptogens like ashwagandha. With ashwagandha, I always like to tell people if you're on thyroid medications, talk to your doctor first, because depending on the medication you're on, there is a contraindication just based on how those two interact. So it's very important to like talk to your practitioner first to make sure there is no negative mixing of that. The other thing that needs to be done is androgen production needs to be reduced. So again, some doctors can prescribe a low dose of anti-androgen medication or supplementation. And then also limiting inflammatory foods can be helpful as well. So opting for a Mediterranean style diet. But the big thing here is stress reduction. So just like we talked about with the last one, making sure that you are focusing on recovery, eating enough, having enough carbohydrates, doing things to actively slow down your breathing, and your heart rate on a regular basis throughout the day is incredibly important. And then lastly, we have post-pill PCOS. So this one is primarily an androgen issue, but it can include any of the symptoms from the ones that we just talked about. So a low-dose anti-androgen medication can really help here. So that's an option to talk to your doctor about. And again, supplements like palmetto can be really helpful as well. But again, stress reduction and with the post-pill PCOS, talking to your practitioner about the anti-androgen medication can be really helpful. But again, reducing stress will help with that. So this is where recovery is so important, you guys. It will set you free. I know it's hard to not want to push, but it will make the biggest difference for you, I promise. Then there's treatment for all PCOS types. So if you have any type of PCOS, this can be incredibly helpful and anyone can take this advice. So the first one is exercise. Exercise of any kind is going to be better than nothing. So being active is helpful. However, resistance training and walking has been shown to be the most effective. So remember that exercise has a myriad of health benefits, including more insulin sensitivity, having better muscle mass retention, which we know during perimenopause and menopause, we have a really hard time building muscle mass and a really hard time maintaining it because estrogen goes down. And when we're in a stress state, our body wants to get rid of that muscle mass. So making sure that we are exercising appropriately, focusing on building strength, taking longer rest periods is going to be incredibly important for you. The next one is consistent protein and calorie intake. Consistency is so important, as well as having adequate calorie intake. Our body will be more comfortable when it's being able to predict what's coming in. So it knows how many calories you're getting in a day, which then your body doesn't have to play defense. So it'll lower your immune response, because a safe body is a body that adapts in the way that we want. Imagine being constantly on edge, not knowing how your partner's going to react, or not knowing whatever. There could be a war going on in your place, and you're not knowing how the next day is going to be. That's what it's like when you're not having consistent caloric intake. So your body's constantly on defense because it's like, am I going to get enough food today? Am I not going to get enough food today? Are we skipping meals? Are we not skipping meals? So your body's stuck in defense. So your immune system's going to be more exaggerated, and your body's going to want to store fat because it doesn't know what to anticipate. So this is where consistent calorie intake and protein intake is going to be incredibly important. Fiber. Fiber helps with blood pressure, with blood sugar and insulin regulation, helps with healthy bowels and a digestive tract, which again is going to have a bunch of positive outcomes just on its own, but it's going to help with excess hormones that our body is trying to break down and get out, when it does that through our stool. So having a healthy gut is going to be incredibly important. Plus, when our gut isn't healthy, we're going to see more inflammation, which can lead to PCOS as well. Stress reduction. I think you guys have heard me say this a million times. So important. I swear stress is 90% of all illnesses and issues that we have. If we can actually treat our body appropriately and understand what is stress, everything stresses our body out, how that affects our hormones, what is too much stress for us, it is going to help you so much. So if you can mitigate your cortisol response, we can manage our hormone communication and blood sugar so much more, which is a direct link to PCOS. So it's very, very important. And a lot of doctors will try to prescribe birth control to help treat PCOS symptoms. The only advice with this is to remember it will not fix anything. It is not getting to the root cause. It is not solving the problem. If you're done having kids or don't want kids, birth control may be an option to try in order to reduce your symptoms, but keep in mind you should still be changing your lifestyle factors, or you could develop hypothyroidism or other autoimmune issues as well, and things like diabetes, heart disease, liver issues, and I don't think you want that. So making sure, even if you're on PCOS just to help you with the symptoms because they're too aggressive, making sure you're still doing the steps to really address the root cause issue so that you can have better health and thrive. So this is the stress reduction, eating enough, having enough carbs, having your fiber, having adequate calorie intake consistently. These are all things that are going to do wonders for your hormonal balances and really set you up for success. And again, ensure to consult a specialized doctor that you trust and can talk to about potential options regarding your specific PCOS, particularly if you are going to be needing some anti-androgen medication. Make sure you go to a doctor that specializes in this. And make sure you talk to your doctor about how that's going to affect your entire body. I think it's really important to be aware that sometimes doctors just like really focus on one number or one lab result or whatever that might be and just give you a medication for that. But you need to understand, why is that number off? What's causing it to be off? Why do you have PCOS? Where did this come from? So you can address the root causes, because unfortunately, like medications and birth control aren't going to do that. So we need to figure out why this is happening and then address that why. I know that was a ton of information. So if you need to play it back, that's okay. We do have a guide on PCOS. It's in our Facebook community, Metabolism Menopause by Vitality. So you can find that on Facebook. We do all of our guides there. We have different ones released every single Friday. And if you ever have questions on how many calories should I be taking, I think I have this, I don't know if I'm eating enough, I don't know if I'm having enough carbs, that's what we're here for. Feel free to message me or email me. I'm always happy to answer. And again, have a great rest of your day and talk to you soon. Bye.